Christopher Columbus is one of history's most famous explorers, often credited with discovering the Americas in 1492. His voyages are celebrated as monumental achievements in world history, but the truth about Columbus and his impact is far more complex than what we learned in school. In this video we'll take a deep dive into the real story of Columbus's voyages, examining the myths, the reality, and the lasting consequences of his actions. Join us as we explore the truth behind Columbus's journey and how it changed the world forever. 1. The legend versus reality, what we've been told. The story of Columbus is often simplified into a heroic tale of a daring navigator who set sail across an uncharted ocean to prove that the world was round and that a direct route to Asia was possible. But much of what we've been taught about Columbus's motivations and his journey is based on myth and incomplete history. For centuries, Columbus has been portrayed as a visionary hero who discovered America, despite the fact that indigenous peoples had lived on the continent for thousands of years, and the Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, had reached North America centuries earlier. Columbus did, however, open up the Americas to European exploration and colonization, but at what cost? 2. Columbus's early life and motivation. Born in Genoa, Italy in 1451, Christopher Columbus was not the self-taught sailor many assume him to be. He was well educated, having studied geography, astronomy, and navigation. As a young man, he became a sailor and spent time in Portugal and Spain, learning about the latest maritime technologies. His main goal was not to prove the Earth was round. This had already been established by scientists and sailors long before Columbus set sail, but to find a faster route to Asia for trade. By the 1480s, Columbus believed that the best way to reach Asia was by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. He sought financial backing for his journey from the royal courts of Portugal, but it was King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain who ultimately agreed to fund his expedition. They were eager to compete with Portugal's dominance in the East and wanted to find new trade routes and expand their influence. 3. The First Voyage, a journey into the unknown. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. His objective was to reach Asia by sailing westward, but he didn't realize that an entire continent lay in his path. After more than 2 months of sailing across the vast, unknown Atlantic Ocean, Columbus and his crew finally sighted land on October 12, 1492, an island in the Bahamas which Columbus named San Salvador. At first, Columbus believed he had found islands off the coast of Asia, and he called the people he encountered Indians, mistakenly thinking he had reached the East Indies. His interactions with the indigenous peoples were often characterized by misunderstandings, as Columbus viewed them through the lens of European superiority, believing they were potential subjects for conversion to Christianity and forced labor. 4. The truth about Columbus's discovery. Although Columbus's landing in the Caribbean in 1492 is often referred to as the discovery of the Americas, this term is both inaccurate and problematic. Columbus did not discover lands that were already inhabited by millions of indigenous people, and his arrival marked the beginning of a wave of European colonization that would have devastating effects on native populations. Columbus's idea of discovery was rooted in the European mindset of exploration and conquest, which often overlooked or outright ignored the existence and sovereignty of indigenous peoples. Furthermore, Columbus was not the first European to reach the Americas. Viking explorer Leif Erikson and his crew had already arrived in North America around 500 years earlier, though their settlement did not last. 5. Columbus's subsequent voyages, the expansion of empire. Columbus would go on to make 3 more voyages to the New World, each one bringing him farther into the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. However, his voyages were not without controversy. His leadership was often questioned, and his harsh treatment of the indigenous peoples he encountered was increasingly criticized. In the course of his exploration, Columbus enslaved many of the native people, forcing them to work in gold mines and on plantations. Columbus's treatment of the indigenous populations, including violence, forced labor, and the spread of diseases, had a devastating impact. The arrival of Europeans led to the decimation of indigenous communities through disease, war, and exploitation. In fact, the diseases brought by Columbus and other Europeans wiped out as much as 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas in the decades that followed. 6. The controversy. Was Columbus a hero or villain? Columbus's legacy is highly controversial today. On one hand, his voyages opened the door to European colonization of the Americas, which led to the establishment of vast empires and the exchange of goods, cultures, and ideas. This period, known as the Columbian Exchange, brought about the exchange of crops, animals, and technologies that reshaped the world. On the other hand, Columbus's actions are responsible for the suffering of millions of indigenous people who were enslaved, killed, and displaced from their lands. His legacy is tainted by the long-term consequences of European colonization, including the exploitation and destruction of native cultures and ecosystems. In recent years, the celebration of Columbus has come under scrutiny, and many cities and institutions have reconsidered how they honor him. Some advocate for replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day as a way to acknowledge the harm caused by European colonization and to honor the resilience of indigenous communities. 7. The lasting impact of Columbus's voyage. The impact of Columbus's voyages is undeniable. They changed the course of world history, bringing Europe into contact with the Americas and setting the stage for the global exchange of goods, people, and ideas. Columbus's journeys also marked the beginning of European colonialism, which would have profound and lasting effects on the world. However, it is important to recognize that Columbus's legacy is not one-dimensional. While he is often seen as a symbol of exploration and achievement, his voyages also represent the darker side of European expansion, including conquest, slavery, and the destruction of indigenous cultures. 8. Conclusion: the real Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus is a historical figure who represents both the spirit of exploration and the darker legacy of European imperialism. While his voyages undeniably changed the world, it is essential to examine his actions and the consequences of those actions in their full context. Columbus was neither a perfect hero nor a pure villain, but rather a product of his time. A man whose ambitions, mistakes, and actions shaped the course of history in ways that continue to be felt today. In our next video, we'll dive deeper into the age of exploration and the long-term effects of European colonization on the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the real history behind the myths and legends of the past.